Prince Harry is in the news. I don't particularly want to talk about him, but
we're going to anyway.
We're going to anyway because my timeline is just full of people talking about Prince Harry because he's brought out a book called Spare. I don't think it's actually out yet. I've seen lots of people talking about like previews or something, but I mean maybe it's out, and I'm not going to read it even if it is.
I've seen many good memes about alternative titles.
I have seen many of those memes.
Simp, spare me, please.
Yeah. Many effective memes. But the point is, okay, I actually something in the headlines running through my social media timeline actually started getting my attention because it was the first one where he's like, look, I want my father and my brother back. It's like, okay, well, who took them away from you? You had your father and your brother. Something happened, and now they won't speak to you.
We need to get Tom Harwood on the case. Something happened.
What was that something? And so I thought I'd look into it. And in doing so, I just found essentially the process by which Harry was radicalized. It's pretty straightforward, actually, and you guys are probably going to be familiar with it, but I thought we'd go through it.
You seem to have got a pretty comprehensive timeline going through here as well.
Yeah, I think we do. It's not necessarily in time order either. It's more about the expression of what's happening. But before we begin, I thought I'd plug Gad Saad's wonderful book, The Parasitic Mind. You did this, didn't you?
No, it wasn't me. It was Connor and Josh. I have
sorry.
read the book in the past, though, and I've got a copy. It's a very good book.
And if I'm correct me if I'm wrong, but he's explaining how woke ideas are like a parasite in your mind.
Yeah, exactly
and
that.
They ruin everything around you.
Yeah,
maybe you want to get a copy, Harry.
Pretty much.
Just saying. So let's begin with Harry saying, "Well, look, before I was married to Meghan, I was a racist." So let's watch.
What Meghan had to go through was similar in some part to what Kate and what Camilla went through. Very different circumstances. But then you add in the race element, which was what the British press jumped on straight away. I went into this incredibly naive. I had no idea the British press was so bigoted. Hell, I was probably bigoted before the relationship with Meghan.
You think you were bigoted before the relationship with Meghan?
I don't know. Put it this way, I didn't see what I now see.
Now that's very interesting.
I can almost feel Meghan off screen, just with a gun to his head, just because that sounded so desperate to get approval.
Maybe. I'm not gonna. I mean, obviously, I think she is in some way influencing and manipulating him, but he is letting it happen because of what like he says, what I didn't see and what I now see. So right. So.
Well, that's the thing. When Dan and I covered the first part of the documentary for Netflix, there was these brilliant moments where it's explaining his life before Meghan, which honestly just sounded like a good life, and then it went wrong. It sounded one of those inevitable coming to doom, tragic heroes type stories. But he spent a lot of time in Africa as a teenager and as a young man. He's
presumably being a racist.
Yeah, I can only assume so. He's like friends with an African prince. He spent time in Zimbabwe and Botswana, like actually helping the people on the ground.
Typical racist.
I know. And then later on, he's at the NAACP awards show where Meghan's being given an award or something for
her
best girl boss or something like that. And he's just there like, I never understood the implicit systems of racism that operate within the institutions we live in until I met all of these people. It's like,
that tells you something, doesn't it?
Real oppression, real bad situations is not everything you actually saw firsthand in Africa. It's all of these, the most privileged, rich black people in the entire world telling you there's racism, bro. Police is dem's racist, bro.
I know, it's mental, isn't it? But I love this. So from his own position now, he's adopted some kind of new conceptual framework. That's what he means. What I didn't see then and what I now see is what's been highlighted to me, and it's caused me to render my previous self as a racist. So I don't think you were a racist, Harry, and I don't think you really think you were a racist, but you're kind of forced into it by adopting this new framework, right?
And this is like the opposite of They Live. He's taken the glasses off.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And so essentially this is him being seduced by a foreign woman. And in this, and this is a fascinating article by The Guardian, where they're just, telling us about things that are in his book. He details how he got into an argument, a fight with Prince William over this, and William kicked his ass.
With the Chad Prince William.
Yeah, exactly, which just makes me like William more, frankly. Right? They said this, describing a confrontation at his London home in 2019. Harry says William called Meghan difficult, rude, and abrasive.
True.
Well, it seems true, just from the way she acts, which Harry called a parroting of the press narrative about his American wife. It's like, Harry, how have you never had a girlfriend before, right? Because he seems to be like genuinely like a teenage boy who's trapped up in this sort of cycle of lust and romance with this strange foreign woman. And it's like, it's fine. You know, we've all had girlfriends that have turned us against our mates and made us be like, no, she's not like that. She's not like that. It's like, no, to you, she's not like that on purpose, because what she's trying to do is break you away from the security of the social bonds and the relational bonds that you have with all of these other people, so she can have you all to herself. This is not a new trope. This is something that a certain kind of woman has done since time immemorial. And Harry, you are falling for it, you absolute fool, right? So William says in this, he says that William was like, I'm trying to help. And he's like, definitely, I believe genuinely William was trying to help. Because again, I've seen friends fight over women like this. It's just, it's a tale as old as time, I swear to God, right? And so Harry apparently said, are you serious? Help me. Sorry, is this what you call this? Helping me? It's like, yes. He says, Harry, this angered his brother, who swore while stepping towards him. Okay, good. Now scared, Harry writes, he went into the kitchen.
He sounds like such a bitch.
Exactly. You've adopted an incredibly womanly aspect to this, Harry. This is about two brothers fighting, and you're like, no, I'm the little sister. It's like, no, it's not on, Harry, right? He gave his brother a glass of water and says, I can't speak to you when you're like this. He writes, he set down the water, called me another name, then came at me. It all happened so fast, so very fast. He grabbed me by the collar, ripping my necklace. Why are you wearing a necklace? Right? And knocked me to the floor. I landed on the dog's bowl, which cracked under my back, and the pieces cutting into me. I lay there for a moment, dazed, and I got to my feet and told him to get out. Now, doesn't that just sound womanly? The description. Like, these things all happened to me. I wasn't an agent, and then I was like, oh, get out of my house.
Well, yeah, it just sounds like a massive L.
Yeah, it is. But William urged him to hit him back, citing the fights they had as children, and Harry refused to do so because he'd transitioned at this point. And so...
Well, we know who wears the pants in the relationship.
Sorry, Harry, right? I don't mean to be dunking on this, but this is really womanly behaviour that has been... Again, you've been convinced that this is appropriate and right, and actually, when it's two men dealing with their problems, actually it's not appropriate. It's actually inappropriate for you to approach your brother as if you're a woman. You know, you should have fought him, to be honest.
Yeah, we'd stop dunking on you if it weren't just so
easy.
easy.
Exactly. And you don't have to win, you know, just stop being a...
Stand up for yourself. I mean...
Yeah, exactly. Stand up for yourself. If you genuinely believe all of this, stand up for yourself like a man.
And also, if you genuinely love Meghan in the way that men do, you should be standing up for her honour.
Exactly. Defending yourself, defending her honour, and William would have respected that as well, right? But anyway, William apparently apologised afterwards, just because, I mean... You've got to.
It must have just been pity.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was thinking too. Right. So William confirmed for Chad, and I'm rather glad about that. I'm looking forward to him being king.
Glad he's first in line.
Yeah, thank God. But they say when William left again, his brother writes, and he turned and called back, you don't need to tell Meg about this. And it's like, well, you mean you attacked me? Oh, God, look at that. You attacked me. Oh, shut up. You know, he didn't come up with you with a knife. It's two brothers having a scrap. What an absolute woman, right? But Harry didn't tell his wife, but he did call his therapist.
Oh.
Now that's interesting.
He didn't tell his wife, but he did tell the press.
He didn't go to the pub and have a couple of beers with the lads and be like, God, I just had a fight with my brother over Meghan. What is he so angry about? You know, he didn't talk it out with a few mates or something. No, I went to my therapist. What, in California? Actually, yes. It was a therapist in California, right? And this seems to be where he was brainwashed by a therapist, right? So he's been lured in by the seductive Californian foreign girl, and now he goes to the foreign therapist. Why did my brother get angry with me? Well, we'll see. Let's go to the next article.
Probably gay and just repressed it or something.
Who knows?
That's going to be the Californian therapist
it turns out he's
response.
trans. But anyway, the Prince of Wales feared his brother was being brainwashed by his therapist, the Duke of Sussex claims in his memoir. Yes, because it really looks like you're being brainwashed by a bunch of foreigners, actually, Harry. Prince William, who was on a royal tour of Pakistan at the time, was texting with him to express concern, noting that Harry was clearly struggling and needed help. And then Harry was like, I'm doing therapy. They said, quote, in fact, not that long ago, he had asked if he could come with me to a session because he suspected I was being brainwashed. That's literally Harry's words. William wanted to come to the therapy sessions because he thought the therapy was brainwashing his brother.
I mean, we've all had those family gatherings where you've not seen some people for a while, and maybe, I mean, I only have an older sister, I don't have any brothers, but I've got cousins and such, and maybe the cousin comes along who you've not seen in a while, who's suddenly wearing all of the badges, hair's dyed all funny colours, and you're just like, okay, what happened?
Well, that's it. And so William's doing the right thing here, I think. So, no, look, I think they're turning you against your family in these therapy sessions, and I think Meghan's facilitating this. I'm a bit concerned about it. Anyway, he says, well, come. I'm sure it would be good for the both of us. He never came. His strategy was obvious. I wasn't well, which meant I wasn't in my right mind, which is why I was behaving questionably. Yes.
I've just thought of another thing as well. Like, given the sort of political attitudes that your typical Californian therapist would have, I wouldn't be surprised if this is purely intentional as a way to try and literally break up elements of a royal family. Because what do Californian leftists hate? They hate family. And they hate hierarchy. What is the royal family? The ultimate expression of both of those concepts.
And it's also, totally not. It's nothing that was planned out either. So it's just. It is exactly, as you say, the absolute antithesis of everything that a Californian leftist is going to want, right? And so you can see here that Harry is essentially admitting, oh, I was radicalized. He says, I had to work hard to keep my text to my brother civil. It's like, why? Why? Because he doesn't agree with the new belief system that you're becoming indoctrinated into, right? The conversation had descended into a 3-day argument, all day and all night, the likes of which they had never previously endured. He claims that after months of therapy, his worst nightmare was coming to fruition, that they were becoming strangers. So, okay, but your brother isn't going to therapy. He's not changing. You are changing. You are becoming indoctrinated into a new way of thinking that for you, as you previously said, renders your previous self, when you were just normal, a racist. Okay? You're the one who's adopting this new way of looking at the world.
And it's his words, not ours.
Exactly, and this is all in your own words, right? He could no longer recognize me or tolerate me. Harry admits that he saved all of the texts and still reads them sometimes with sadness and confusion, wondering, how did we ever get here?
Look in the mirror, mate.
But again, it's a woman who's breaking the bonds of love that you have with your family in order to have you for herself, in order to destabilize this family for her own gain. And this ideology that she's using to do it is being propagated by the therapist, which is why William was like, this therapy is doing this to you.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, I've seen family breakups before, and it always happens over two things, which is either a death in the family that causes some trouble rifts between relationships, or a woman. In this case, the royal family sadly has both, because they've had a few major deaths in the family, and then we've got a woman tearing it apart as well.
But the death in the family didn't tear the family apart. Like, because Diana died when he was like 12 or something.
No, I mean the more recent ones where...
Oh, the Queen.
Philip and then the Queen as well, because it seems that there were some tensions rising during those meetings where the family got together as well. Yeah. There was the quote of King... Oh my goodness, I forgot. King Charles. I'm so sorry. I'm so
sorry, Your Majesty.
Yeah, I'm so sorry, Your Majesty. Yeah, King Charles apparently had to get up between Harry and William while they were arguing at Philip's funeral and just say, like, please, boys, don't make my last years a misery.
But anyway, he says, how do we ever get here? And essentially, Harry, the answer to this is that you agreed with the Californian left that the most important part about Meghan was her race. That's why. Because in other interviews, he said that, well, they were angry because she was American. And it's like, there we go. That's the real reason. She's an American. That's the problem. It's not, no one cares that she's black.
Americans have never worked for the royal family.
Yeah.
Historically.
No, well, they're a bunch of Republicans. How could they? But anyway, he after the row, he reveals that Prince William wrote and told him that he loved him and would do anything necessary to help him. So it's not that William's like, I hate you or anything. Harry's the one who's causing the rift with his new ideology. Anyway, so Harry continues to be a strong advocate of therapy and thanks more than a dozen practitioners in the acknowledgements of his memoir. These include John Amaral, a California-based energy practitioner who he says can help heal depression and post-traumatic stress, and Eric Goodman, the creator of Foundation Training, a yoga-like series of exercises to deal with chronic back pain. So the Californification of Prince Harry is what's happened here, right? And just to be clear, I completely agree with Lawrence Fox on the Meghan Markle question. She's not black. No one sees her as black. She doesn't look black. No one would have said she was black.
Once again, in the documentary, she explains that she had to keep telling casting directors that she was black because they didn't believe her. They thought she was just some tanned Californian woman.
Yeah, she looks Spanish. You tell me she's black, then okay. I don't really believe you. But I suppose I have to accept it. Anyway, so then Harry, after this, begins framing his own family in remarkably negative ways. So he's framed himself as a racist, he's framed his brother as aggressive and unreasonable, and now he's framed his entire family as, quote, a death cult? Do you think you're the extremist here, Harry? Is everyone else who's been... Like, this is an ancient institution that everyone's been operating within completely normally right up until this point where you got brainwashed by a bunch of therapists and a woman you find seductively attractive for whatever reason. And now, oh yeah, my family is a death cult. I don't think your family's actually a death cult, right? Like, I don't think many people's families are death cults, really. It sounds a bit extreme, doesn't it, Harry? But he says this, right? Reflecting on the upbringing with William in the memoir, he says their brightest days were overshadowed by death. It's like, okay, that's about tragedy, Harry. That doesn't make you a death cult if you've experienced tragedy. And, your mother died, your grandmother died. Well, everyone's grandmother dies, but, like, your mother died. That is a genuine tragedy, right? But he says, even when Harry and his brother had a stronger relationship, death haunted the family. But now I saw that even in our finest moments and best memories somehow involved death. That sometimes happens, man.
That's just life, sadly.
That's just an aspect of life. Eventually people die. Memento mori. Unfortunately, we've just got to accept it. Right? Our lives were built on death. Our brightest days overshadowed by it. Looking back, I didn't see spots of time, but dances with death. Okay. Is this a healthy way of looking at anything? And then he goes on to complain about his own family lineage. Windsor Castle is a tomb. The walls filled with ancestors.
That's an incredibly negative way of looking about it.
It is.
I'd be looking about proud that I can trace my family lineage back so long and in such a noble line.
Like, I've got pictures of my grandparents on the wall in my house.
It's not unusual.
It's not doomed to my dead ancestors. It's a celebration of their life now they've passed. Like, it's just such a crazy negative framing that portray. Like, imagine being a prince and being like, yeah, this is evil. Oh, come on.
Well, I mean, this is just the American framing of the whole thing.
Exactly.
The Americans looking at it going, oh, you weird English with your strange traditions and customs. Yeah, go away.
Windsor Castle is a tomb the walls filled with ancestors, and the Tower of London held together by the blood of animals. Blood of animals?
Does that mean anything?
Blood of executed traitors and criminals, maybe. What the hell does that mean? But then he says maybe we were a death cult. It's like, that's not what a lineage is, Harry. A lineage is not a death cult. It's an honor, an honoring of the people who came before you, who provided you with the good things that you cherish or should cherish now.
Once again, this is just the American progressive attitude bleeding through, though. It's this cut yourself from all ties of lineage and family. If you
be a year zero self-made man.
If you honor your family, that's just honoring death, which is bad and evil somehow.
Yeah, but anyway, so let's get into the accusation of racism, right? Because so. You may remember that he had an interview with Oprah Winfrey. But before we go on to this quickly, there's a little bit on the previous one I want to end on, where he says the episode... Harry said the episode was an example of unconscious bias when someone apparently said they were concerned about the colour of the baby, which, again, just...
That's just a reasonable thing to be like,
well, no, I don't even
wonder.
think it's reasonable. I don't know if I believe it, but, like, so? Like... My mum had to have a conversation about the colour of my son with my oldest son.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, fair play. How come?
Because he was just curious what colour he'd come out as.
Oh,
and we were like
fair
the
play.
same colour as us, son.
Yeah, that would make sense.
But anyway, so he says the royal family needed to learn and grow in order to be part of the solution rather than part of the problem. Right. So the racist death cult royal family that you were once a part of and now have totally rejected needs to learn and grow, as in change, in order to not be a part of the problem. You sound like a Republican, Harry. You sound like you need to abolish this archaic institution, right? Because he's got this particular quote here. Otherwise, unconscious bias then moves into the category of racism. Right. So they're unconsciously biased against other races, and now that's a form of racism because they're not changing that. Especially when you are the monarchy, you have a responsibility, and quite rightly, people hold you to a higher standard than others. So you are accusing them of being racist here, right? That's an accusation of racism. Am I wrong?
Pretty cut and dry.
But what else are you implying if that's not... You mean, you literally said the unconscious bias moves into the category of racism. And then he was like, yeah, well, I never actually called you a racist, though, did I? It's like, no, that does seem to be what you're saying.
I just said you were on the slippery slope to racism, bro. Don't worry about it.
Do exactly as I say, or you're a racist tomorrow. You know. So this has come about where he said he's insisted he did not believe the royal family is racist and never claimed that he suggested that they were. Like, we've got Google, Harry. We can just look. Like, we can go back and see what you've said, and you saying, well, they're unconsciously biased, then if they don't correct themselves, that becomes racism. Don't know what to tell you, bro. Like, so this during the Oprah Winfrey thing, he was like, he also said, I'm not accusing them of racism, even though the family had raised concerns about the color of their unborn son's skin. But he said they're not essentially racist. I wouldn't say that not having lived within that family. Right. So you're thinking of, you know, your brother, your mother, your father, your uncles, your aunts, your cousins. And like, no, they're not a bunch of racists. So why are you saying that they're unconsciously biased, and if they don't do what you say, they're going to be racists? Why are you saying that? You know they're not racist.
The institution, the system that they operate within is racist implicitly.
Yeah.
So the only solution will be get rid of that entire system.
So the exact quote, I could have got the clip, but you know, this will do. The Meghan was saying, you know, in those months when I was pregnant, there were concerns and conversations about how dark his skin might be when he was born. The conversations with Harry, who relayed them to her, both she and her refused to say which royal did it. The conversation I'm never going to share, said Harry. At the time it was awkward and I was a bit shocked. And they refused to name the person. It's like, really? I mean, was that really one of the arguments? Was it one of the conversations they had? It's like, well, what colour is the skin going to be? It's like, what difference does the colour of the skin make?
I'm sorry, looking at these two, I wouldn't be worried about the colour of the skin anyway.
No, not particularly. But even if he came out black as night, so what? He's still the direct lineal descendant of the prince, isn't he?
That's also true. But once again, when your dad's a ginger, I don't think you've got much to worry about.
So anyway, Harry doubled down on this. No, I didn't call them racist. The press called them racist. And it's like, well, the press did indeed call them racist. But that's only because, there's with a feeding frenzy with sharks, someone had to throw the chum in the water, Harry. And you were like, over the side, and be like, no, look at the sharks. I didn't do that. So he said, he's done a series of interviews, by the way, because obviously he's promoting his new book. Why he's so interested in hammering home this narrative is another question. It's like, what do you think you stand to gain here, Harry? Like, why are you constantly making these sort of narrative attacks on your former life, on your parents, on your brother, on the institution of the monarchy? Why are you doing these things? You don't even know, I think, why you're doing these things. And the answer is, of course, you're radicalized into a cult. But anyway, Harry doubled down on this in another interview. In the Oprah interview, you accuse your family members of racism. He says, no, the British press did that, right? Did Meghan ever mention they were racists? Well, I mean, we have a clip. Should we watch this next clip?
And if a member of his family will comfortably say, we've all had to deal with things that are rude. Rude and racist are not the same.
Now, just to be clear, I've slightly taken out of context. But
all right.
So what she's saying there is there were people in the family who obviously the press had been the press is quite aggressive towards members of the royal family, and the press had been calling Kate weighty Katie because she had to wait to marry William. And
I thought they were just making fun of her weight.
Yeah, but what she was talking about is actually the press being racist to her. But again, the implication is completely contained within the way she was on. Well, I mean, there's being rude and there's being racist. And like, yeah, and that's what you mean. With all of this, when you bring up any of this, you are talking about racism. So don't give me this nonsense, right? And the complaint was, the press team isn't defending me. Why? Well, who knows? They must be racist too.
The whole thing is very slimy. I don't know how he could try and say anything about, I was never calling everybody racist, when in the documentary for Netflix, the whole thing is based around, it literally takes a massive tangent to say, oh, by the way, did you know that the British Empire was horribly racist? And gets Guardian journalists like David Olusunga to go like...
We'll get to that in a second.
all right.
We'll get to that in a second. So he again doubles down on this and says, no, look, all I was saying was unconscious bias. If you can go to the next one, you can see. He said, no, it was just unconscious bias. But as you've already said, unconscious bias moves into the category of racism. So you admit that you're calling them racist, right? And the press understandably interpret this as you're calling them racist because they print articles like this one in Time that the core message of Meghan and Harry's Oprah interview, racism drove us from the royal family. Yeah, because that's what you're saying. You know, you don't have to call them a racist to directly, implicitly say that they are being racist. You wouldn't say it otherwise. And of course, this led to people saying, well, who's that racist royal that you refuse to identify? Who knows? But I thought you weren't calling them racist. Don't you want to be like, oh, no, actually, sorry, chaps, you've got the wrong end of the stick here. I didn't say there was a racist royal. So you can knock off that. And why did William have to be like, no, we're not a racist family in 2021? Because the press were hounding them about being racist.
I mean, if they wanted to clear this whole thing up, they did have that long-standing Spotify podcast deal that they just didn't use for years.
Didn't they make one episode of that?
I think they made 2 episodes and then it stopped. And then I looked recently and Meghan Markle now has her own Spotify podcast where she talks to inspiring women from around the globe.
Amazing. But the point is, you knew what you were drumming up when you leveled these accusations. You were implying that the royal family was racist, and of course the press ran with this because that's what they expect. And it's not just the royal family, of course, it's Britain as racist as well, isn't it, Harry? Of course it is. As you said, the Britain and the Empire were horribly racist. Brexit is racist, obviously.
Yeah, they do a lot of that in the documentary. Britain's racist, Brexit was racist, don't you understand? Britain's full of evil people who hate black people because of Brexit. Interposed with lots of images of little old ladies with Union Jack flags cheering on Harry and Meghan as they walk down the street, of course.
Right, yeah. Because the royal family is an unconscious bias as part of the problem when it comes to racism in Britain. The problem being Britain is British and not non-British. This is now racism. Lengthy segments are given to the academics Afua Hirsch and David Olusoga.
Olusoga, I assume that's how.
Yep.
He's the guy who wrote that Black and British book.
Yep. And Afua Hirsch is just someone who just wants to praise every day for the destruction of Britain. But the point is, thanks for enabling these anti-British race grifters, Harry. It's weird how you're not calling anyone racist. It's just all of this stuff calls everyone racist all the time. And of course, there was a part by Kehinde Andrews, my favourite anti-racist. Demented lunatics, basically. And so there we go. That's pretty much it. So when it comes to all of this, he goes through this conversion to American ideology, becomes a racial activist, breaks all of his bonds, and then eventually he's like, look, I want my father and brother back. And you've got to ask yourself, Harry, who took them away? What took them away? Why are you acting this way? Why are you in these deeply ideological battles with your own family? Why have you rejected them? Not they rejected you. You're the one who left. They didn't tell you to go. You left, right? And so this is what started this whole segment, really. Harry says, I would like to get my father back. I would like to have my brother back. They've shown absolutely no willingness to reconcile. It's like, no willingness to reconcile. You called them a bunch of racists internationally, and then you left with a foreign woman, and you are insisting that they have to agree with you that they are racists to reconcile.
I mean, it seems to me as well that William starting the world's most pathetic fight, because Harry refused to fight back, was all done in the attempt to get him to address and communicate properly. It wasn't to try and push you away, Harry. It was trying to bring you back into the fold. Let's fight like we used to when we were children, and then we can have a proper discussion about this like men. Exactly.
That's exactly right. And Harry's response is, well, if you won't join my woke cult, you're not reconciling with me. It's like, no, they shouldn't join your woke cult, right? But he says, I want a family, not an institution. And it's like, okay, that's interesting because you're a prince. Well, you were a prince. And the royal family is, of course, an institution. In fact, it's not, it's the institution. It is the fulcrum that the entire United Kingdom revolves around. It's the United Kingdom. The royal family is the institution at the center of that. And you know what? It's actually fine if you want to leave. It's actually totally fine. No one's going to be angry with you. If one day Prince Harry came out and said, I actually don't think I really want to be a prince. I've thought about it. I've fallen in love with a foreign girl. And actually, this just isn't the life for me. I just want to leave and go about my life and live as a private citizen somewhere in America or something. You'd be like, okay, totally understand, man. You were born into it. It's
Once again, it's not like he's first in line for the throne, so it's
Exactly.
not even that big a deal.
It's not a big deal. And yeah, like you say, he's not first in line for the throne anyway. But even if he was, I think it would be understandable. You know, we say, look, I was born into this. I didn't choose this. It's too much for me, or whatever. I've got my reasons. I just don't want to. You know, I'm gonna abdicate, and everyone would understand. But instead, writing books and going, yeah, so you're all a bunch of racists because I'm particularly woke now. And yeah, so in fact, Britain's racist, the Empire's racist, everything's about you racist. You're all evil. Death cult, in fact. I'm off. It's like, well, what? That wasn't necessary. You know?
All in his never-ending quest for some damn privacy as well.
yeah, that's another thing. In fact, let's go to the next one. Yeah, like Dan pointing out, my God, Prince Harry is now lecturing Charles and William on keeping their private conversations private. Can you even imagine the irony of this? But anyway, yeah. So in summary, Harry, you've been seduced by a foreign woman. You've been seduced into a foreign ideology. You've been brainwashed into it by your therapist, and now you're blaming everyone else for the things that you've done, even though everyone can see what you've done. I'm not even like, or at least I wasn't a particular monarchist until you were pointing out that William was going to beat you up, which, fine, okay, now I'm a monarchist. But the point is, you're doing this to yourself, and you're not doing yourself any favours.
If you appreciated that segment from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to get access to all the premium content we have on the site, such as the Contemplation series, this one on the importance of family. And if you'd like to find out what else we're putting out, you can follow us on Getter at lotuseaters_com on Getter. Thank you and goodbye.